My name is Emily Harper, and I am 29 years old. I used to believe that the people you work with every day could become something like family. Not the loud holiday card kind of family, but the quiet kind that shows up when a deadline is crushing you, or when a client is being impossible. You stay late together, you celebrate small wins over bad coffee, and you start to think the loyalty runs both ways. Then one unexpected late-night voice message arrives, and every invisible rule you thought you understood suddenly rearranges itself. It was a Thursday in early spring, the kind of damp Ohio evening where the air outside my little rental house smelled like wet pavement and the first brave daffodils. I had just finished reheating leftover pasta when my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. The screen lit up with Victoria Lang's name. My boss almost never called after 8. A voice message icon appeared. I pressed play, expecting maybe a last-minute note about the Morrison pitch we had been grinding on for weeks. Instead, her voice came through smooth and measured the same tone she used in client meetings when she wanted everyone to feel taken care of. Emily, I listened to the voicemail you left about wanting more visibility on the Morrison deliverables. I think you might be overreacting a little. The whole team contributed, and the client has been responding really well to the direction we set together. Maybe use the retreat this weekend to reset and get some perspective. We can circle back, Monday morning. The message ended. I stood there with the phone still in my hand, the pasta going cold on the stove, overreacting. I had stayed until midnight 3 nights that week, fixing the deck the client hated. I had rewritten the strategy deck twice after Marcus, my coworker, kept changing his mind about the visuals. I had taken the angry client call at 7 in the morning because Victoria said she had a dentist appointment. And now the credit was being framed as something the whole team had done under her direction. I played the message again, then a third time, trying to hear something I might have missed. There was no warmth in it, no acknowledgement of the hours I had poured in. Just that gentle, almost maternal correction, "You're overreacting." I had heard that phrase from her before, always delivered with a small smile, always when I asked for something concrete, like a title bump, or clearer ownership on a project. Each time it landed the same way, making me feel slightly childish for wanting the work I actually did to be seen. I sat down at the little kitchen table and stared at the steam still rising from the pasta. For almost 4 years, I had treated this agency like it was worth that kind of investment. The culture deck on the wall in the office literally said, "We show up for each other like family." Victoria had hired me herself when I was 25 and terrified after a layoff at my first job. She had told me during my interview that she believed in growing people from within. I had believed her. I had defended her in meetings when other teams complained she was tough. I had even covered for Marcus once when he missed a deadline because his kid was sick, staying until 2 in the morning to finish his section so the client would never know. Now the same boss who had once called me the glue on this team was telling me I was overreacting about credit that was visibly mine. The knot in my chest tightened. I didn't cry. I just sat there feeling the slow, cold realization that maybe the family language had only ever been language. The next morning, I packed for the company retreat anyway. It was an annual thing, 2 nights at a conference center in the suburbs west of Columbus, meant to feel like a team-building reset before the busy season kicked in. I had helped plan parts of it back in January, suggesting the breakout sessions and even picking the welcome gift bags. I almost texted Victoria to say I wasn't coming, but the thought of giving her another reason to call me difficult stopped me. So I drove. Marcus had offered to carpool weeks ago, and I had said yes before any of this happened. The 40-minute drive felt longer than it should have. He kept the radio low and talked about how excited he was for the new business development lead role that was opening up. Then, almost casually, he said, "Hey, I heard you and Victoria had a thing about the Morrison deck. She mentioned you were pretty worked up. You know she's under a ton of pressure from Richard right now. Maybe just let it breathe this weekend." I kept my eyes on the road. Worked up isn't really how I would describe asking for my name on the work I did. He shifted in the passenger seat. "I'm not saying you didn't do the work. I'm just saying sometimes the optics matter more than who typed the last version. Victoria's the one who has to sell it upstairs. If she feels like you're making it a thing, it's probably not worth it." The words landed with the same soft weight as the voice message. "You're making it a thing." I had heard versions of that from him before too, always framed as friendly advice. Marcus and I had started at the company within a month of each other. We had covered for each other on late nights and split takeout during all-nighters. I thought we were on the same side. Sitting in the car with him now, I felt the first real crack in that belief. We arrived at the conference center just after lunch. The place was all beige carpet and large windows looking out at carefully landscaped grounds that tried hard to feel like a resort instead of a corporate offsite. People were already gathering in the lobby with name tags and those reusable water bottles the company handed out every year. I saw Victoria across the room laughing with Richard Bennett, our CEO, her hand on his arm, in that easy way she had with leadership. She caught my eye and gave me the same small, reassuring smile she always used in the office. It made my stomach turn. I went up to my room on the second floor, dropped my bag, and sat on the edge of the bed for a long minute. The room was quiet, except for the low hum of the air vent. I told myself I was here to do my job, to get through the sessions, to keep my head down. Then I remembered I had left a folder of old project notes in the common workroom downstairs earlier that week when we were prepping. I needed one of the mood boards for a breakout I was supposed to lead tomorrow. The workroom was mostly empty when I got there, just a couple of people from another team setting up laptops at the far end. On a side table near the back wall, there was a cardboard box labeled Archive 2021 Planning that someone must have pulled out for nostalgia or for one of the icebreaker activities. I flipped through it, looking for anything useful, and found a thick spiral notebook at the bottom, the kind the company used to use for internal brainstorming before everything went digital. I almost put it back. Then I saw my name on one of the pages, written in Victoria's neat handwriting. It was from a meeting note dated almost 3 years ago, right after I had landed a big campaign that had gone well. The line was short-tucked between budget numbers and action items Emily Harper. Strong on execution needs, tighter management on credit conversations, emotional about ownership, replaceable if pattern continues. I read it twice. The handwriting was unmistakably hers. The date matched a time when she had still been telling me in one-on-ones how much she valued my voice on the team. My hands felt cold against the paper. I closed the notebook slowly and slid it back into the box exactly where I had found it. For a few seconds, I just stood there in the quiet room, the low chatter from the other end of the space sounding far away. Everything I had told myself about loyalty and being seen and the family language on the wall rearranged itself around that one sentence. She had been managing me the whole time, not developing me, managing the parts of me she found inconvenient. I walked back to my room with the folder I had come for, but I didn't open it. I sat on the bed again and stared at the closed door. The retreat schedule was taped to the inside. Team dinner at 6, optional bonfire at 8, strategy breakout tomorrow morning that I was supposed to help facilitate. I had helped plan all of it. Now every item on the page felt like it belonged to someone else's version of the story. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia Reyes, my friend from college, who still lived in Cleveland. She had been checking in all week because she knew how much the Morrison project had mattered to me. I typed out a short reply, telling her I was at the retreat and that things felt off, then deleted it before sending. I didn't have the words yet. Down the hall I could hear laughter from someone's open door. Marcus's voice carried for a second, saying something about how Victoria always knew how to keep the team balanced. I stayed where I was, the notebook page still sharp in my mind. The version of me that had believed the family talk felt very far away. The version that was left sitting on the hotel bed felt smaller, but also strangely clear. I didn't know what I was going to do about any of it yet. I only knew that something had shifted in a way that couldn't be shifted back. I stayed in the room a little longer after that, the notebook page still sharp behind my eyes. The laughter from down the hall felt like it belonged to a different version of the weekend. Then I washed my face, put on the company polo I had packed, and went downstairs because skipping the team dinner would have looked exactly like the reaction Victoria seemed to be waiting for. The dining room was set up with long tables and those little name cards we always used at offsites. I found mine near the middle between Marcus and Amanda Torres from the account side. Victoria was already at the head table with Richard Bennett and Lena Voss from HR. She waved when she saw me, the same warm, inclusive wave she gave everyone. It made my chest feel tight. Dinner started with the usual round of toasts about how the team had crushed the first quarter. Victoria stood up halfway through her salad and gave a short speech about resilience and showing up for each other. She mentioned the Morrison account in passing, saying the client had been really impressed with the collaborative energy from the whole group. A couple people clapped. Marcus nodded like he had been the one on the late calls. I kept my hands in my lap and smiled the way I had been taught to smile at these things. After the plates were cleared, people broke into smaller clusters. I was heading toward the coffee station when Victoria caught my elbow lightly. "Emily, can we grab a quick minute?" she said, voice low and concerned. "I just want to make sure we're good before tomorrow's sessions." We stepped into the smaller lounge off the main room. She closed the door most of the way and turned to me with that same gentle expression from the voice message. "I know the Morrison thing has been weighing on you," she said. "I want you to hear that I see how hard you work, but when you push for individual credit like that, it can start to feel like the team isn't enough for you. I've had a couple people mention it feels a little intense. I'm saying this because I care about you growing here." The word intense landed like the note in the notebook. I had heard her use it before about other people who eventually left. My throat felt dry. I wasn't asking for a parade, I said, trying to keep my voice even. I asked for my name on the final deck because I wrote most of the strategy section and handled the revisions the client actually approved. That's not intensity, that's accuracy. Victoria tilted her head a fraction, the way she did when she was about to reframe something. "See, that's the part that worries me a little. You're framing it as something that was taken from you, instead of something we built together. I need you to think about how that lands with the rest of the team. Marcus has been really supportive of the direction, and he's not the only one. I'd hate for people to start feeling like they have to walk on eggshells around you." She reached out and squeezed my upper arm, once the same reassuring gesture she used with new hires. Then she opened the door and walked back into the dining room like the conversation had been warm and productive. I stood there for a second, the pressure of her hand still on my arm, even after she was gone. The gaslighting was so clean, I almost doubted the notebook again. Almost. When I went back to the main room, Jordan Hale was waiting near the door with 2 cups of coffee. He was 24, had started 6 months ago, and I had been the one who trained him on the client management side. He handed me one without saying anything at first. "I saw her pull you aside," he said quietly. "You okay?" I took the cup. "Just the usual check-in." Jordan looked at me for a second longer than he needed to. "She said something in the hallway earlier to Richard about how some people on the team are still learning how to be collaborative at this level. She didn't say your name, but it felt pointed." My stomach dropped. The reputation damage was already moving. Small comments dropped in the right places, always wrapped in concern, always so no one could call it outright mean. I thanked Jordan and told him I was fine. He nodded, but he didn't look convinced. The rest of the evening blurred. There was an optional bonfire that most people went to. I stayed inside and helped one of the younger coordinators reset the breakout room for tomorrow, because it gave me something to do with my hands. Marcus came through at one point and asked if I was coming outside. When I said I was tired, he just said, "Probably smart. Get some rest so you don't come in too worked up tomorrow." He smiled when he said it, like we were still on the same team. I went back to my room around 10. The hallway was quiet, except for the low sound of a TV in someone else's room. I sat on the bed again and pulled out my phone. Sophia had texted earlier, asking how the retreat was going. I stared at the screen for a long time before I called her instead of texting back. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, you sound like you're in a hotel." "I am," I said. My voice came out smaller than I meant it to. "Soph, I think I've been stupid about this place for a long time." I told her about the voice message, the car ride with Marcus, the note in the old notebook, and the conversation with Victoria after dinner. I didn't cry, but my hands were shaking a little around the phone. Sophia listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a second. "Emily," she said, finally, "you've been telling me for years that this job felt like the first place that actually saw you. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop because it sounded too good. Sounds like the shoe just dropped. I keep thinking maybe I'm reading too much into it," I said. "Maybe the note was old and she's changed. Maybe I did come across too strong about the credit." Or maybe, Sophia said gently, the version of you that believed the family talk was the version they needed you to be so you'd keep producing without asking for anything back. And now that you're asking, they're making you the problem. The words sat heavy between us. I wanted to argue with her. I wanted to say that Victoria had given me chances when other places wouldn't. But the notebook page and the conversation in the lounge and Marcus's comments in the car were all lined up in my head now, and they wouldn't rearrange into something kinder, no matter how hard I tried. After we hung up, I lay on top of the hotel comforter with the lights still on. My laptop was on the desk where I had left it. I opened it and started a new document, not because I had a plan yet, but because writing things down had always been how I made sense of them. I titled it simply, Notes, Retreat Weekend. Then I listed the voice message, the exact words from the notebook, what Victoria had said in the lounge, and what Jordan had overheard. I didn't know what I was going to do with any of it. I just needed it outside my own head. Around midnight, I heard footsteps in the hallway and low voices. One of them was Victoria's. She was laughing softly at something Richard said. They passed my door without slowing down. I closed the laptop and turned off the light, but sleep didn't come for a long time. The next morning, the strategy breakout I was supposed to help run went exactly the way I had started to expect. Victoria opened the session by thanking the team for the Morrison work and then asked Marcus to walk everyone through the final deck. He did it smoothly using the slides I had built. When someone asked a question about the client feedback on the revised strategy, he said Emily helped pull some of the research together on that. It was technically true and completely minimized. Victoria smiled and moved the conversation along. During the break, Jordan came over to where I was standing by the coffee again. He kept his voice low. I don't know if this matters, he said, but Lena from HR asked me this morning if everything was okay on our team. She said Victoria had mentioned some friction and wanted to make sure no one felt uncomfortable. I told her I hadn't noticed anything. She looked like she was writing it down anyway. I nodded. The net was widening. Reputation damage didn't need to be loud. It just needed to be repeated in the right rooms by the right people until the story became that Emily was the one creating problems. By lunchtime, I had made a decision I hadn't expected to make when I packed for the weekend. I wasn't going to confront Victoria in front of everyone. That would only give her more material to call me emotional. I also wasn't going to pretend everything was fine and go back to the office on Monday like the notebook page didn't exist. Instead, I was going to finish the retreat, go home, and start quietly figuring out what my options actually were. I didn't have a dramatic plan. I just knew I couldn't keep treating the place like it was safe when every interaction now felt like it was being recorded for a different purpose. That afternoon, there was a closing circle where everyone was supposed to share one thing they were taking away from the weekend. When it got to me, I said something short about appreciating the chance to reset perspective. Victoria nodded like she was proud of me for saying it. Marcus gave me a small thumbs up from across the circle. I kept my hands folded in my lap and counted the minutes until I could get back in my car. On the drive home, the roads were wet again from a light rain that had started during the last session. I didn't turn on music. I just drove and let the quiet sit. Every so often, the notebook line would surface in my mind, followed by Victoria's voice saying I was overreacting, followed by Marcus agreeing that I was making it a thing. The version of the story they were building was already stronger than the one I had lived. I didn't know yet how far they were willing to take it, or what it would cost me to push back. I only knew that the family language on the office wall had never been meant for someone who asked to be seen clearly. I pulled into my driveway just before dusk. My little rental house looked exactly the same as it had when I left 2 days earlier. The daffodils by the front steps were still there. I sat in the car for a minute with the engine off the steering wheel, cool under my hands. Then I picked up my phone and opened the document I had started in the hotel. I added one more line at the bottom Monday morning. Decide whether to keep documenting or start looking for a way out that doesn't burn everything down. I didn't know which choice I was going to make yet. I only knew that whatever happened next, I was no longer going to do it while pretending the rules had ever been fair. The weekend was over, but the questions it raised followed me into Monday morning like a shadow I couldn't shake. I walked into the office with the document I had started in the hotel still open on my phone, the lines about the notebook and Victoria's words in the lounge sitting there like evidence I hadn't decided what to do with yet. The usual morning chatter felt thinner. Amanda Torres gave me a quick smile that didn't quite reach her eyes when I passed her desk. Marcus was already in a meeting with Victoria when I got to my area. I sat down and opened my laptop like it was any other day. By mid-morning, the pattern was clear. 2 people who usually stopped by my desk for quick questions about client history didn't. When I walked past the small kitchen, I heard Marcus's voice, and then Victoria's soft laugh, the kind she used when she was making a point without raising it. I didn't catch the words, but the tone was enough. Jordan Hale caught my eye from across the room and gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of his head, like he was warning me not to go in there. I nodded once and kept walking. I spent the next hour updating the Morrison files, even though I knew Marcus was probably presenting them as mostly his work now. Around 11, I asked Lena Voss if she had a few minutes. I had never gone to HR before, except for benefits questions. Lena was polite when she closed her office door behind me. I wanted to talk about something that happened at the retreat, I said, and some things that have been building for a while with Victoria. Lena folded her hands on the desk. Her expression stayed neutral, the professional HR mask I had seen her use with other people. Victoria mentioned there might be some tension on the team. She's concerned that you've been feeling overlooked and that it's starting to affect collaboration. She wanted me to check in and see how we can support you. The framing was already done. I was the one with the problem. I took a breath and told her about the voice message, the notebook page I had found, and the conversation in the lounge. I kept my voice steady and stuck to what had actually been said. Lena listened without taking notes at first. When I finished, she leaned back slightly. Emily, I hear that this feels significant to you, she said. But I also have to consider the context Victoria has shared. She's described a pattern where feedback about shared ownership lands as criticism for you. That can create friction for the whole group. We've seen this kind of thing before with high performers who are very invested in their individual contributions. Sometimes the healthiest step is to look at whether the role is still the right fit. There it was. The gaslighting had moved from my boss to HR. I was being told gently and professionally that my reaction to being erased was the actual problem. I thanked Lena for her time and walked out. My hands were steady, but something inside me had settled into a colder, clearer place. Fighting this inside the system they controlled would mean spending months being managed as the difficult one, while the story about me spread. I didn't have that kind of energy left, and I wasn't sure I wanted to win a war inside a place that had never been honest about the rules. Jordan found me at my desk a little after lunch. He closed the door to the small side room we sometimes used for calls and kept his voice low. I wasn't going to say anything while you were still deciding, he said. But I found something this morning when I was looking for an old campaign folder in the shared drive. There's a subfolder Victoria keeps for team notes. Most of it is normal, but there are a couple of documents with names and dates. Yours isn't the only one. There are entries for 2 people who left last year. Same language about being emotional about credit and needing tighter management. One of them was the woman who trained me before you did. He showed me on his phone just long enough for me to see the pattern. It wasn't dramatic proof that would hold up in court. It was the same quiet managerial tone Victoria had used in the notebook I found. She had been running the same play for years, and the people who left had probably been told they were overreacting too. Jordan looked uncomfortable, but steady. I don't know what you're going to do, he said. But if you decide to go, I wanted you to know it wasn't just you. And I'm sorry I didn't say something sooner. I thought maybe I was imagining it. I thanked him. The confirmation didn't make the betrayal smaller, but it made the choice clearer. The facade wasn't going to crack from the inside because too many people still needed it to hold. Victoria would keep running the team the way she always had, and the people who stayed would keep hearing that anyone who asked for clear credit was the problem. I went back to my desk and drafted a short resignation email. I kept it simple, personal reasons, effective, immediately grateful for the opportunities. I didn't mention the notebook or the gaslighting. I sent it to Victoria and Lena at the same time, then started packing the few personal things I kept at my desk. A plant Jordan had given me when he started. A coffee mug Sophia had painted for me years ago. The rest could stay. Victoria came to my desk 20 minutes later. She looked concerned in the exact way she always looked when she needed to manage a situation. "Emily, can we talk in the conference room for a second?" she said. We sat across from each other at the long table. She closed the door. "I got your email," she said. "I have to say, I'm surprised. I thought we were making progress on the communication piece. Leaving like this is going to raise questions with the team and with clients. I wish you had come to me first instead of going straight to HR." There was no anger in her voice, just the same gentle disappointment she had used in the voice message and in the lounge. I looked at her and realized she genuinely believed the version she was telling, or she had told it so many times she no longer needed to believe it. "I did come to you," I said. "Multiple times, and every time you told me I was overreacting, I found the notes you wrote about me 3 years ago. Jordan found the ones about other people. I'm not interested in spending the next 6 months being performance managed for noticing the pattern. I'm resigning because I finally believe what you've been showing me." Victoria's expression shifted for just a second, something tighter around her eyes before the concern came back. I think you're interpreting some old internal notes in a way that fits a narrative you've built, she said. That's your choice. I hope you find a place that feels like a better fit. We'll process your departure as a resignation with no issues on our end. You'll have a neutral reference. She stood up like the conversation was finished. I stayed seated for a moment longer. You told me when you hired me that this place valued people who spoke up, I said. I believed you. That was my mistake, but I'm not making it twice. She didn't answer. She just nodded once, the way she did when a meeting had reached its conclusion and left the room. I finished packing while most people were in a client call. Jordan helped me carry the small box to my car without saying much. Amanda Torres walked past in the hallway and gave me a quick, awkward wave. Marcus didn't come out of his meeting. Maya Patel at the front desk asked if I needed help with anything on my way out, and her voice was kind in a way that made my throat tight for a second. I told her I was fine and thanked her. The drive home was quiet. I didn't turn on music. When I pulled into my driveway, the daffodils were still there, a little more open than they had been on Thursday. I carried the box inside and set it on the kitchen table. Then I called Sophia. She answered before the second ring. "You did it! I did it!" I said. My voice sounded steadier than I expected. It doesn't feel like winning. It just feels like stopping. We talked for almost an hour. I told her about the meeting with Lena, the conversation with Victoria, and what Jordan had shown me. Sophia didn't try to make it into a victory story. She just listened and said at the end, "You chose yourself when the cost of staying was pretending you didn't see what was happening. That's not nothing." After we hung up, I sat at the table with the box of my things and let the quiet settle. The loss was real. I had spent 4 years building relationships and routines inside that office. Some of them had been genuine. Jordan's quiet support on my last day had been real. Maya's kindness at the door had been real. But the structure that held them had never been what it claimed to be. The family language had been a tool, not a truth. Walking away meant losing the version of belonging I had believed in, and that hurt in a deep, specific way I hadn't let myself feel while I was still inside it. Over the next few weeks, I updated my resume and started talking to recruiters. I took on a couple of small freelance projects to keep money coming in while I looked. The first time I sat down to work on something that didn't require me to manage anyone else's perception of me, I felt a kind of stillness I hadn't expected. It wasn't triumph. It was the absence of the constant low-grade performance I had been doing for years without realizing it. I didn't have to translate my contributions into language that wouldn't threaten anyone. I didn't have to smile through corrections that erased me. The relief was quiet, but it was real. I still think about the notebook sometimes, not with anger exactly, more with a clear, sad recognition that some people build their stability by keeping everyone else slightly off balance and grateful for whatever scraps of validation they hand out. Victoria is still at the agency. From what Jordan has told me in the occasional text, she got the promotion she was angling for, and the team is still hearing the same gentle language about collaboration and family. The facade is intact for the people who need it to be. I don't have the energy or the evidence to tear it down from the outside, and I've stopped wanting to. What I have instead is a smaller, steadier life. I pick my projects now. I say no when something feels like it's asking me to disappear inside someone else's story. I still get the occasional text from old colleagues who are confused about why I left so suddenly, and I answer them kindly but briefly. The everyday connection to that particular group of people is gone, and I feel the absence sometimes like a room that used to have light in it. But the peace that came from refusing to keep performing inside a system that required me to doubt my own memory is bigger than the loss. I learned something I wish I hadn't needed to learn at 29. When the people in charge have spent years building a version of reality where asking for fairness makes you the problem, the only winning move that doesn't cost you pieces of yourself is to stop playing. Choosing yourself isn't dramatic. It's often quiet and expensive in ways that don't show up on a resume, but it's the only option that leaves you intact on the other side. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever poured years into a place or a person who made you feel like the difficult one for wanting to be seen clearly, I hope you know you're not the first and you won't be the last. The question I keep coming back to is simple. What would you have done when the voice message came in, or when you found the notebook, or when HR told you the problem was your reaction? I'd really like to hear what you think.